Karoline Leavitt painted a picture in Jerome Powell's mind that's destined to haunt the halls of his memory. Don't take my word for it, witness it yourself.
But unfortunately, we have interest rates that are still too high, so the president sent this note to the Fed chair.
The president passed a note to Powell today, stepping up the Trump camp's push to slash interest rates. Karoline came in ready for battle, but Powell didn't stay quiet for long. Less than a day later, he fired back, throwing shade at Trump's tariffs.
But, Chair, would the Fed have cut more by now if it weren't for the tariffs?
So I think that's right. In effect, we went on hold when we saw the size of the tariff.
That's exactly why today we're unpacking this whole circus, because we're not here to cheerlead for any party. We're here to serve up something rare in politics, common sense. So if you've got a brain that likes to think for itself, hit that subscribe button, and let's get into it.
The president has consistently stated the American economy is booming. And there were so many economic analysts who said that this president's policies would drive our economy down, when in fact we have seen the opposite. We've seen a massive deregulation campaign take place. We've seen inflation completely diminished from where it was under the reckless spending and the bad policies of the previous incompetent administration. I would remind the Fed chair, and I would remind the entire world, that this is a president who was a businessman first, and he knows what he is doing. He has a proven economic formula that worked in his first term as president, and it is working again. The one problem that remains is high interest rates for the American people. The American people want to borrow money cheaply, and they should be able to do that.
Aside from immigration, the economy has been one of Trump's biggest bragging rights so far. Sure, his tariff experiments gave Wall Street a few mood swings, but when you zoom in on the numbers, a lot of that media panic starts to look more like clickbait than crisis. Case in point, just a few days ago, the New York Fed released a report saying inflation expectations ticked down in the short term and stayed flat in the medium and long term. Job loss concerns are down, spending dipped slightly, but household income expectations are up. That's not exactly the sky falling. Those are solid receipts that the economy isn't unraveling the way the doom and gloom headlines suggest. And let's be honest, if Biden had numbers like that, the mainstream media would have thrown him a week-long victory parade. Which is exactly why Karoline showed up with a chart like a teacher catching Powell without his homework.
But unfortunately, we have interest rates that are still too high, so the president sent this note to the Fed chair today. And if you look at this chart, this is a chart of all of the interest rates of many countries throughout the world are all paying lower interest rates than the United States of America, which has one of the hottest and strongest economies in the world. The president sent this note to the Fed chair. It says, Jerome, you are as usual too late. You have cost the USA a fortune and continue to do so. You should lower the rate by a lot. Hundreds of billions of dollars are being lost, and there is no inflation. And the president is right. There is historically low inflation thanks to his policies. And we will continue to drive down the cost of living in this country for Americans. We will continue to deregulate.
The latest push to cut interest rates really boils down to one simple pitch: cheaper loans for everyone, which could give the economy a nice jolt of caffeine. But here's the catch: slash them too soon, and inflation could come back like that unwanted sequel nobody asked for. That exact tug-of-war was the main event at last month's Fed meeting. Sure, most policymakers seemed open to the idea of cutting rates at some point, but for now, they've filed it under, let's just watch this a little longer. Jerome Powell even brought that same cautious message to Portugal at the European Central Bank's forum, where he basically said, relax. We're not speedrunning this decision.
The U.S. economy is in a pretty good position. Inflation has come down close to 2%. We're at 2.3 headline, 2.7 core.
Chair, would the Fed have cut more by now if it weren't for the tariffs?
So I think that's right. In effect, we went on hold when we saw the size of the tariffs, and essentially all inflation forecasts for the United States went up materially as a consequence of the tariffs. So we didn't overreact. In fact, we didn't react at all. We're simply taking some time. As long as the U.S. economy is in solid shape, we think the prudent thing to do is to wait and learn more and see what those effects might be. And again, they haven't really shown up. So for now, we're waiting.
Fair point, but here's the twist: even the countries taking the hardest hits from Trump's tariffs were busy slashing their own interest rates. CNN reported that the European Central Bank, the Bank of Mexico, and others have been trimming their benchmark rates like it's haircut season. Meanwhile, the Fed? Still parked in the waiting room. So while other economies are loosening up to stay competitive and dodge slowdowns, the US is just tapping its foot, raising the question, is this genuine caution, or political theater with better lighting? That's exactly where Karoline jumped in, doubling down with this.
You outline Jerome Powell and the note that the president just sent to him. There are many who believe that Powell has been politicized in a lot of different ways. The president has not been shy about acting on things that he believes in. Why not just fire Jerome Powell and put in somebody that is going to lower rates? Why wait?
Well, it's a good question, and one you can ask the president, because that's a decision for him to make. But you're right to point out the politicization of the Fed, and it's very unfortunate for our country. But Jerome Powell cut rates numerous times ahead of the election when Joe Biden was in this Oval Office, but now he refuses to, and the economy is in a much better place. So there really isn't a good explanation for that, and the president is rightfully calling attention to it.
Although the Fed is supposed to be the independent referee of the economy, some folks saw Jerome Powell's comments on tariffs as more of a political jab than a neutral call. And honestly, this isn't the first time they've blurred that line. Take 2020, for example, when the Fed rewrote its mission statement, shifting focus from inflation first to jobs first, sprinkled with plenty of inclusive language. Powell even admitted that addressing racial gaps in unemployment played a big role in the change. Now, maybe it's just me, but monetary policy should be about boosting the economy for everyone, not about scoring points for activism or virtue signaling. And speaking of points, Trump's been keeping score loud and clear. He's ramped up his criticism of Jay Powell, even publicly calling for his resignation.
Jerome Powell, who you've been pressuring to lower interest rates, he's facing accusations of lying to Congress, which is a potential crime.
Well, then he should resign immediately. We should get somebody in there that's going to lower interest rates.
Do you want congressional
Why don't you call for his resignation?
Do you want congressional Republicans to investigate and pursue?
It's okay with me. I think he's terrible. I think, look, we're paying, I call him too late. T-O-O, too late. Like Too Tall Jones for the Dallas Cowboys. Right? Too late. He's always late. But he wasn't late with Biden before the election. He was cutting him like crazy. It didn't help too much, did it? But he was cutting him like crazy before the election with Kamala.
This isn't the first time Jerome Powell has faced this kind of pressure. You might recall back in 2019, when Trump's public frustration hit a fever pitch and speculation about Powell's job was everywhere. When asked directly whether he would resign if the president demanded it, Powell's answer was clear and to the point.
Some of the president-elect's advisors have suggested that you should resign. If he asked you to leave, would you go?
No.
Can you follow up on do you think that legally you're not required to leave?
No.
These comments get especially juicy for two big reasons. First, they feel less like a suggestion and more like a shove, pressuring supposedly independent policymakers to fall in line with the president's playbook, even if they don't buy in. Second, the Supreme Court already ruled back in May that Trump can't just fire Jerome Powell on a whim. That's why some analysts are whispering that the administration might be laying the groundwork, either cooking up a legal loophole to oust him or ramping up the pressure until Powell quits voluntarily. So, what do you think? Is this a high-stakes chess match, or just political theater with better popcorn?